Welcome to the Islamic Library Association. We are dedicated to showcasing Muslims' rich contributions to literature and society while advocating for accurate representation and equity in libraries. Hello and Assalamu alaikum everyone. Today we are thrilled to be here with Zakiyyah, also known by her birth name, Ruby Moore, and her Muslim name, Baina Siddiq. Zakiyyah is the internationally acclaimed, award-winning author of more than 40 books, including novels, short stories, and self-help. Her books are used in high schools and universities in the United States and worldwide. Some of her work has been translated into multiple languages. For her soul-touching books and spiritual reflections on emotional healing, Zakiyyah is a world-renowned author, speaker, and soul care mentor. She specializes in supporting Muslim women transforming to the best versions of themselves personally, emotionally, and spiritually. Zakiyyah currently teaches the Quran and is a mental health practitioner specializing in Muslim women's emotional and spiritual health. She has an audience that includes approximately 80,000 people worldwide, 85% of whom are women. Most are Muslim, but there are also Christians and Jews who also follow her work. Zakiyyah is a certified member of International Association of Counselors and Therapists and an executive member of International Institute of Complementary Therapists. She currently is based in Dallas, Texas, but she has studied Arabic, Quran, and Islamic sciences in the USA, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia for more than 15 years. She has a bachelor's degree in elementary education, a master's in English language learning, and a certificate at Cambridge Certificate of English Language Teaching to Adults. Wow, such a phenomenal bio. We would need at least a few days to really unpack all that you have done in your career. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us despite your obviously very busy schedule. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we dive right into this conversation?
I would just say that the main things that I'm focused on now, I could tell like it's the bio hasn't been updated, which is my fault. But everything on there is actually still currently true. It's just that I am focused now on mostly Feminine Soul Reset, which is a basically a therapeutic support group. I call it a compassionate accountability community for Muslim women, and that's my main focus right now.
That's amazing. Just add more to what you do. It is such amazing work. So, again, I'm so happy for you being with us tonight, and let's dive right into it if you don't mind.
No, let's do it. Yeah, Bismillah.
All right. What drives your passion and commitment to your work, particularly in supporting Muslim women's personal and spiritual growth?
For me, that's something that developed after I had already written several novels. This was not something that I ever thought I was going to be focused on. But it occurred actually following my spiritual crisis. You know, I almost left Islam and I didn't feel like I could be Muslim. And I just remember just praying to Allah to preserve me. And then I asked Him, like to bring me through this. And then I said, if you bring me through this, I will dedicate my life to helping other people work through similar things. And so that was kind of like a surprise type part of my life. I've always been drawn to, just being that friendly support, but not necessarily, I never imagined myself in an official capacity helping people in that way. I just kind of was comfortable behind the book, just writing a novel and having people be inspired by just the human stories.
Hmm.
But my own journey uh, which it got the most, my spiritual crisis got the worst after my divorce, my first divorce, from my daughter's father. And it just, I was introduced to a part of the Muslim community after being married for over 17 years that I didn't know about, because I had gotten engaged at 19 years old. I got married at 20. And so my pretty much all my adult life was through the lens of a married woman,
Mm-hmm.
until I found myself in my late 30s, um, almost, approaching 40, as a single mother. And in addition to all of the healing that you have to do within yourself, I really did not know. Like, I heard about there's a stigma about divorced women. I heard about all that, but I really was very ignorant about how much hostility is actually targeted at women who choose divorce, even when people don't even know what happened. And
Mm-hmm.
so that exacerbated what I was going through. And I remember this was before I got my certification. I think I was studying to get my certification in therapy. I remember some Muslims, well, a while back up, I was working through my own darkness through doing self love affirmations, trying to love myself, because a part of my trauma was the feeling that women don't matter. And a lot of it was looked at through the deen, things that were either taught directly or indirectly, or how I experienced my faith up until then. And I remember someone who was very well known, which somebody I know, but I love her for the sake of Allah. I won't mention her name, because I do believe this was just a mistake and an oversight for her. But she had made a post about how, self love, this is like type of almost like shirk, like worshiping yourself. And I was like, oh my God. And I realized that people think it's a sin to love yourself, you know? And so, anyway, that really
Unfortunately.
made, yeah, unfortunately, and that really made me curious as to what this was about. And I saw the most visceral reaction when it was a Muslim woman who wasn't married saying, I'm learning to love myself, I'm learning to get back to the things that I love. And so, long story short, because there's so many dips and twists and turns in that
Mm-hmm.
journey, I realized that no, not only am I striving to hold on to my faith, I'm striving to hold on to my mental health. I'm drowning in this. The space where I thought I was going to get that support is antagonistic against my journey itself. And that's what actually inspired me to say, okay, this is not okay.
Wow. It's unfortunate that, you've had to experience that, but look where Allah has brought you,
That's true.
through that. So, everything happens for a reason. It's not always comfortable. I know you know that, but
Yes, it's very rarely comfortable. Yes.
yes, it's amazing that
Mm.
that situation got you here. So, alhamdulillah. So,
Alhamdulillah.
what themes or issues do you feel are most important to address in your writing and speaking?
I would say the number one is spiritual health for anyone, men or women, anyone. Just the spiritual wellness of the human soul. That
Mhm.
is my top priority. And then I would say after that, emotional wellness, mental health, because it's all connected. Um, and um, and I would just say and with that, just getting to a space of healthy, soul nourishing self love, whether you're a man or a woman, so that you can take care of yourself and take care of your soul and actually fulfill the mission that Allah put you here for.
Yes, yes. So you mentioned how you kind of got into this so in depth. You said how you liked it a little bit behind the books, within the pages. But once you've made that commitment to, be a direct impact, head on, uh, what genre would you say that your writing falls under, or what age group do you primarily write for?
I mean, I today, although you mentioned over 40 books, today I have over 50 books, and I would say that, I mean, I have different genres. There's obviously there's the novels,
Mhm.
but I would say today a lot of my work falls under self-help with like aspects of memoir attached to that. sharing a bit of my story in the self help.
Okay. So do you think more towards adult women, or do you think young women would, you know,
I think that today the work that I have leans more towards adult women, although my novels go across the spectrum from young adult. Well, actually, I have even have a children's book
okay,
published, so my fiction goes the whole range. But in terms of my nonfiction, it's focused on adult. It's mostly an adult Muslim woman audience,
nice.
although non-Muslims do read it.
Yeah. So how do you balance writing your fiction between your novels and short stories, and then to also write nonfiction with your self-help?
Well, I say, to be honest, it's as balanced as it looks on that bio. That is not how it's experienced in real life. I genuinely believe I have undiagnosed ADHD. I mean, genuinely. And so
Mhm.
how I, operate is that I don't necessarily have this like grand plan. I just have like, I'm inspired to do this, so I start doing this. Oh, I'm tired of doing that. Let me do this. And so I'm like working on like five, 10 different projects at the same time. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this one's almost finished. Let me hurry up and finish that one. And then, and then there you have it,
As long as it's good for you.
organized chaos.
Yeah, if it works for you, that's good.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. And it works when it works. I mean, I still have a lot of projects on my heart that are, it's a little bit more challenging to finish. But, I've learned to just, as they say, let go and let God. I make my istikhara because that's a general rule that I have before I write anything, especially a full book, but even anything that's in the public space. I just learned to, okay, if you prayed your istikhara, if it's good for you, it's already written, it's done.
That's
You don't
true.
have to stress over it.
It's very good point. So, do you think that your topics are a bit taboo or not typically openly discussed within certain um, circles?
I would say the second part, I definitely know that that's the case with my books, especially when I wrote the book His Other Wife, which people think it's, about polygyny, but it's really about like spiritual crisis, emotional health. Um, but the angles that I take, it's not necessarily often addressed.
Mhm,
Uh, and I would say taboo, I wouldn't call them taboo, but certainly other people have.
mhm. Okay. And have you ever received any pushback, or it's impossible to make everybody happy all the time, but do you feel that you've received any pushback or maybe unnecessary criticisms from maybe even some of the people who you would think the book is designed to help?
I don't know if I would call it unnecessary, but it definitely has been pushback. And the only reason why I hesitate to say unnecessary is that I don't want to, especially after having studied mental health and understanding that everybody's journey is very unique. Uh, it didn't feel good.
Mhm,
And although I've been blessed with a lot of support, but there has been, significant pushback, and even certain names and labels that were placed on me in a derogatory sense. Like one of the derogatory labels, like she's a feminist, and then even someone had said, call me anti-men, and I was like, wow, that's really interesting. That's
mhm,
very offensive, and I definitely don't, agree with these type of labels. But I also understand that if I'm being 100% honest, when I look back at my 19-year-old self getting engaged to get married and then getting married at 20 and being married for over 17 years, it was a time where I probably would have interpreted self love for women, healing for women in a similar way. If I'm being 100% honest, I don't know that I would have outright accused someone of being anti men, but I think I did kind of interpret people choosing to be alone, or women's choosing to be alone specifically, as some type of thing against men. And it was a
mhm,
subconscious thing. And so I won't say it's unnecessary, because I do think that because these are most of these are Muslim women, and well, to be honest, the non-Muslims in my audience, they've never given me that type of feedback. But for the Muslims who say it, I think it's necessary for their journey, so therefore it's necessary for me because Allah wrote it for me, so it was meant for me to hear it. But I don't like it, but it's a part of that growth, that has to happen, and it's helpful because, especially with the work that I'm doing, it forces me to challenge myself to do what I said I was going to do, is be
Mm.
empathetic, loving, and understanding to the journey of my sisters.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. I mean, it's good to, recognize, that you might not be fond of certain things, but to take that criticism and flip it into a positive. Like, this is part of what I said I was going to dedicate myself to. So that's amazing. That's
Well,
definitely
and to
admirable.
be and to be 100% honest, I don't always feel that way. I just end up coming back to that. I get angry and frustrated, calling my best friend, "Can you believe this?" But I Allah almost always just brings me back full circle to say, you know what, it's okay.
Yes. Oh, alhamdulillah. So, what do you think resonates with your audience, particularly Muslim women, about your writings and teachings?
I think it's just that my willingness just to almost like just open up my heart and just put it on the page without trying to pretend that I have it all together, without trying to pretend that I have all the answers. And to be honest, without any quote unquote agenda except can we just take care of our souls and get to paradise? And I think like that's rare for people, and to be honest, had I not almost left Islam, I don't know that I would have had the strength or the courage to do it myself, because it's kind of like when you get to such a dark place where I felt, even at one point, even like I felt the urge to not even be on this earth anymore, and to do something about it. And when you get to such a dark place where you feel like you're going to lose your life and your soul, how the world looks when Allah brings you back is a lot different than how it looked before you got to that point. So, although I didn't expect ever to be this honest about my journey, I was like, I remember when I was in my darkest space and I was frantically searching for stories from sisters who had gone through this and how they worked through this, or anyone, even a man. And I could find nothing except from people who actually had dedicated their life to leaving Islam and they had no intention of coming back, at
Mm.
least according to where they were at that stage. And may Allah guide them back. And I can't even give you the words for how devastating that was. And I remember thinking to myself, like, how can this be? And so when Allah brought me out of that, alhamdulillah, I was like, I mean, I get scared every time now. Don't misunderstand all those books. I am terrified. I get up at night shaking, crying like, "Oh Allah, I don't know if I can do this," every single time. But in the end, I'm like, what at like what are you really afraid of? Because I remember making a promise during that time where I was getting my iman back, and I had been tested. I got remarried, and that didn't work out either, and I had to go back and face the community with another like you know
Mm-hmm.
f- failure or L,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember saying to myself, and I made dua that Allah help me with this. I said, I am willing to sacrifice my reputation in front of people, but I will not sacrifice my soul in front of Allah.
Mm.
So if this is what it takes, then
Yes.
I will do that. I will make the choices that are going to make sure that my soul is preserved with the help
Mm-hmm.
of Allah. And I
Mm-hmm.
will share my story. And if that means, being called names, and I was, and then there even some of the men from our leadership, unfortunately joined in, you know, um, and it's, I will tell you, it never stops being shocking who it comes from. I will tell you that part.
Oh,
That's
yes.
the part.
I understand completely.
Because you're like, I knew this was gonna happen, but it's like, what?
Ooh.
You
Yeah.
know?
Taking our back sometimes, like,
Yeah, it,
you
it
know.
is. And it's just, I think for me, those are the more challenging. It's not necessarily just the pushback, but there have been moments where I could tell, like there were, and this is rare. I would say that, but it does happen. It's rare, meaning it's not the norm from the pushback. Most pushback you can tell is really just a trigger from their own life.
Correct.
But I have had a few um, over the years that have felt almost like I want to tear you down and take you down, like, and it would give me so much pleasure. And those were very chilling,
Yes.
those experiences. And again, who it came from was very shocking. Um, but again, I said, another promise I made was that anyone who, especially amongst the believers, who angers you and upsets you and just triggers you that much, the world will be a better place if they healed. So ask Allah for their healing.
Wow. You have to be in a you have to be in a good place to even be able to get there to recognize that.
Well, I would say, if I'm being 100% honest, when I initially made that promise, when I was faced with, I was like, Allah, can I take that back? I was like, I was so triggered, but I pushed myself because I said, no, what did you say? You know? And sometimes, like, I will go and I'll make the dua, but I won't mention their name.
Mhm,
And I'll just say, oh Allah, you know the dua. So just,
mhm,
taqabbal dua, just answer the dua.
mhm,
Because I was so hurt and angry that I could not bring myself to utter the full dua.
mhm.
And so fulfilling it was a lot harder than making the promise.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it can be like that. But I think it's amazing. And I'll just keep saying it. It's amazing what you do and how you do it and who you do it for, because I think that, like you said, it's not talked about a lot. And just because it's not talked about doesn't mean that it's not happening, that ladies are not having these experiences. So, yeah, I commend you for um, not only making the promise, but taking the efforts and the strides to fulfill that promise that you made to yourself and to your Allah, to get the help that you needed and to be part of the help that other people may need, and to be there for when someone's seeking that help. So,
Alhamdulillah, I would say it's Allah's mercy, because I get up at night and pray, and I ask Allah to help me every night, because it's a very difficult thing to fulfill. I will say that. It's just, oh my goodness. But but I when I calm down, I do sit with myself and say, okay, well, even in worst case scenario, you can just meet this person on the day of judgment. Because, like, I wrote a book called The Abuse of Forgiveness, because my one of the things that helped me in my healing journey is that I don't believe in the culture of forced forgiveness.
mhm,
I believe certain things I can just leave to Allah on the day of judgment, and that's what lifts anger and bitterness. And this spiral from my heart is that Allah will deal with this, not necessarily for punishment per se, you know, but for settling this on the day of judgment. And that has helped me a lot in working through so much and saying that, because I don't want the listeners to think, okay, she forgives everybody. No, not everybody. Most people, but I have a few. I'm like, well, Allah, they're on my list. I will see them on the day of judgment. You do with them as you will, but I have a meeting with them on the day of judgment, and that has helped me feel like I'm supported by my Creator.
mhm.
And I know that's an appointment He would never cancel.
Correct. Yes. So we're talking about some of the pushback that you may receive from time to time. What is some feedback that you've received that may have been meaningful to you, to maybe make you feel like I am on the right track. I am doing something good. Or do you ever receive anything like that?
I would say I received that more than the pushback, if I'm being 100% honest. It's just that, when it's the pushback, it's kind of like that pain in your body. The
Mm,
90% of your body can be feeling fine, but 10% is suffering, and everybody, feels,
yeah.
every part of it feels like it's going to collapse.
Hmm.
But I regularly, by the mercy of Allah, receive messages. I mean, just constantly over the years. It's the norm for me, for someone to say, you know, you changed my life. You inspired me to start praying again. I became Muslim because of your books. One of the most memorable pieces of feedback was when I was living in Saudi Arabia, and I had done a book talk in the city that I was staying in at that time, which was Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia. And there was a family that had come to that talk, an Arab family, a Saudi family, who they lived in Mecca, or they lived like in the outskirts of Mecca, because there's Jeddah and I forget which specific place. But anyway, they lived within less than an hour driving distance to the Kaaba,
Okay.
and they had never entered the Kaaba or had done Hajj or Umrah or anything. They were not a practicing Muslim family. And so the family member who had come, she said, you know, our family found your book, If I Should Speak. We read it, and she said all of them, her husband, the children, they were just like, okay, we need to go make Umrah and Hajj. And so after reading my book, this family who lived an hour from the Kaaba or less got up and went to visit the house of Allah for the first time in their lives. So things like that, you know, sometimes I just cry just hearing the feedback because it's just so beautiful. And you know, it's just it's so touching, you know, that that Allah used my books and me as a vessel to help so many people and support so many people. And it's very, very inspirational, very encouraging, especially when I'm going through a down time or difficult time myself. And those are the times where Allah usually allows me to receive the message. You know, I usually don't receive the message where I'm feeling all good about myself. You know, it's like I see it when I'm down, and which is the perfect timing, you know.
Mhm.
Even though sometimes I'll receive it at other times, but I notice that every single time Allah will bring a sign of goodness um, when I'm down, just to, you know, it helps me keep going, and it just feels really, really good. And I even received a message from a Jewish woman one time, well, from my audience, and she said, you know, I just discovered your work. She said, can you please put me on any email list that you have? She said, because I've decided that, she said, I'm an avid reader. She said, but from now on, I only want to read books by Zakiyyah because it touches my heart.
Oh, that's very touching. Oh my goodness. But so how does that feel? How does that feel to have to know that your work contributed to non-Muslims' lives, non-Muslims accepting Islam, and Muslims practicing Islam?
I am so grateful. I mean, it's beyond what I could have ever hoped for. You know, I remember when I was writing If I Should Speak, the final version that I ended up publishing, and I call it my tahajjud book because I would get up before Fajr and pray 2 rakas, and then I'll write some of the book, and then pray 2 rakas and write
Mhm.
uh, on and on until it's time for Fajr. Uh, and I remember during that time, I made the dua. I said, "Oh Allah, make this meaning that what I'm writing." I was like, "Make this a guide to those whom you wish to guide, and a proof against those who won't be guided." And then after that, and after I published it, a professor from Howard University discovered the book. He had just come back from a sabbatical, and he was researching, had traveled through different parts of the world looking for the Muslim world, looking for uh, novels, English novels about, you know, it was for Islamic novels, but he couldn't find it because at that time that Islamic fiction was not really very well known. You had children's book, yeah, maybe at the most young adult, but you didn't really have the adult. And the even the ones that included Muslims, it was very antagonistic towards
Mhm.
Islam. So he said, so he came back, and then he had just happened to go to the local souk uh, and he himself had converted to Islam a few years before, and he was just going to pick up, I don't know, some dates or something, and he's happened to see my book, And he was like, "What in the world? I've been searching the whole world for a book like this." And so he contacted me, and then I ended up going to speak to some of the classes at Howard University. I found out that Georgetown had used it in certain things, and then I met someone one time where they said they had heard it on NPR. I never heard these things, but they had told me they had heard about it, and that's how they heard about my work. I had no idea. I wish I knew because I would have recorded that episode and uploaded it on every site. But and then one person, no, no, my first orders that were bulk, because I was just at that point just supplying to my local souk, the masjid that I went through. And my first orders came from bulk orders where they're like, we want to like buy bulk these books in bulk. Came from the Australia and it came from Australia and the UK. Until today, I have no idea how they found out. Now that was a time where there was like, oh goodness, I forgot. Pal Talk, that's what it was called. When I don't even know if you're, I don't know if you're much younger than me, if you even were around at that time, but this was a time before social media, uh, and in the early 2000s,
Okay.
and it was like people were in chat rooms, and so I didn't have any advertisement or anything like that. It was just people who had read the book were just doing word of mouth, and the fact that my first orders came from from Australia and the UK, um, really just made me sit and say, "Wow, this is." Even before I got a bulk order from the United States, that was really moving to me.
Hmm. So he said that the man was looking for novels in English and found your book at the store. Um, when did you learn? Is that when you learned that your books were in high schools and universities? So when did you find that out?
Well, the first time, from my understanding and from my knowledge, the first use of the book in officially in a classroom, so to speak, was at Howard University, from my knowledge. Now, of course, there could be someone I didn't know,
Hmm.
and uh, after that, I found out, and after that happened, I was like, wow, this is really neat. So I started Google searching to see, if because some schools will put their, the text of for the curriculum online, and so I started finding other places, and then other things I just found out, um, just for other people, just telling stories. Like for example, there's a friend of mine who was at the store waiting in line in a grocery store, and she's covered as a Muslim, and so someone who was in the line behind her, who looked like she was like maybe 19, and she had told her she herself wasn't covered, but she had told her that she herself was um, looking into Islam. I don't think she had become Muslim, and the sister asked her, well, what made you interested in Islam? And she said, well, in my high school we had a book. I don't know if you heard of it, but it's called If I Should Speak by this woman called Zakiyyah. Now the sister knew me. She was sitting there like I was trying to be real quiet, just listening, like, oh my God, I will call her after this, after I get out of the store. And so she was like, yeah, so we had to read it in high school, and then she had gone to a public school.
Huh?
And she said after that, it made her, think about Islam, and so things like that. I would hear stories, and then I still don't know all the places that it's used, but I was able to there just different um, I don't know, just things that they posted online, or someone may contact me. Like I think it was university. Was it Berkeley? I forgot the name of the major university in California. Different places, um, and so I found out like that. I found out more. I find out more about the colleges and universities because they're more open about on what they assign to the students. But the high schools, I mean, understandably, I'm sure there's a reason for that,
Hmm.
for the students. But a lot of the stuff is not online. But I was just able to find out like that, and I'm still learning. And then, alhamdulillah, they've been used in universities in all over the world. So in Saudi Arabia, I was able to find out because I was living there. So I know, Prince Sultan University. Uh, I can't remember the rest of the universities because I've been, it's been many years since I've lived in Saudi Arabia. But Egypt, I hear professors from Egypt contacting me constantly, because using the book and then using it for their thesis in their PhD program. So alhamdulillah, it's really, really just amazing to me, what Allah has done,
Mm-hmm.
because that's a fact. There's no way I could have done this. I remember someone had contacted me and was like, "I want you to give me your marketing campaign and help me." Like basically, they wanted to hire me to help them get their novel in the same way. And one of the things they asked to, in addition to having them reach all these places, was, "I want you to teach me how to make the readers cry."
Oh, wow.
And I told them that, to be honest, I don't know that I could give you some advice, but I don't think I could ever give you my strategy. I said, because if, as cliche as it sounds, as a Muslim to a Muslim, this is most, I would say 99% dua. I did a couple of things that almost every writer does, but
Mm.
Allah took it in places that I could have never imagined.
Wow. Wow. Well, they're around. They're good.
Alhamdulillah.
So we've discussed your books being in high schools and universities, even in different countries. Are you aware of any of your books being in public library collections?
Very rare. Very rarely. I have heard of it, but that's very rare. In fact, I hear more people contacting me, asking me how to get them in the libraries, or why aren't they? And some of them upset, like, why aren't your books in the library? Like, I chose for them not to be. And I was like, that's not my decision. But I have heard of it. But from my understanding, if I'm recalling correctly, that was a big push. That particular, there was a couple of Muslims in that particular city that
Mhm.
pushed for that, advocated for that, and then finally that library in that town or that city did it. But as a norm, no. Because even myself, sometimes when I go to the library, I just check.
Yeah.
I walk and I personally have never seen my books in the library.
Yeah. So, I mean, as a librarian, what you're saying is probably true. The way the library collections are done is typically they choose their books from the top five publishing companies. And if you're not part of the top five, and well, as we all know, not just Muslims, but many marginalized groups, their manuscripts are not accepted through the top five publishing companies. And so, yeah, that's the biggest issue right there. It, from them even getting seen to be selected to get put into the library collections. So what ends up happening is if someone self-publishes or goes through a smaller publishing company, um, those books do not even get from a public library stance. We don't wouldn't even know your book existed. So
That
what
makes sense. Okay.
Yes. So what ends up happening is, like you said, someone that you know may have gone and personally advocated for your books or one specific book in general. And so what ends up happening is normally that library manager will say, okay, leave a copy, we'll check it out and we'll see. And then let's say 2, 3 months later, they reviewed it and said, okay, we'll put this book within our collections. But then there becomes additional problems from there. For example, now it's only in that library. So it could be 20 libraries in that system. It's only going to be in that specific library. Also, let's say that they have a consortium that they borrow books from and things like that, because your book is not implemented within the system. So another library who's looking at that library system, they still won't see your book. They won't,
Mm.
and they want so if it's in a different county or something, they're not going to see it. They're going to have to be in that specific library or looking specifically at that library's collection, but nobody else can pull it and things like that.
Mm.
Then on top of that, on top of that, I say, okay, your book is there, no one else can pull it, but someone is there and wants it. Well, let's say you go into that specific library to find it. The odds are very high that it was not tagged and cataloged properly. So you probably won't even be able to find it. And then on top of that, let's say someone else is looking for your book and they can't find it. Well, what ends up happening is There's another process. There's a whole weeding. So there's a collection department, and part of that collection department, there's a weeding department. And that weeding has a list of every book in their system. And every library is a little bit different. But let's say, I'm just giving an example, if a book hasn't been checked out more than 5 times in 3 years, they weed it, which means your book may have been there, nobody could find it, and then they're going to discard it and say, oh, nobody wanted it. But it was
Wow.
never properly promoted, highlighted, and then due to, it's nothing personal, but the reality is very high that the cataloger is probably not Muslim and does not know how to tag key words that a Muslim would be looking for when they're searching it. Like, they don't, I don't remember the exact name, but I know it's Zakiyyah, or
Mm.
I know that it was something about fear.
Yeah.
The fear, and they'll try all the different tag words, but it's not, because the person who was cataloging it is not understanding the language of the book or what the
Mm.
tag words would be. Now it's not tagged or cataloged properly. So it's a vicious cycle of the few books that do get through, oftentimes are weeded. And so that's part of where I know I'm on a whole ramble, but I'm trying to explain what you're talking about when you're talking about, your books not being in public libraries. And that's part of what the Islamic Library Association is doing, is trying to have this organization affiliated with the American Library Association, because there's over 115 different committees that are designated towards intellectual freedom, marginalized communities, things like that. And over 115 communities, there's not one for Muslims or Islamic literature. No one specifically speaking on the Muslims' behalf, or Islamic faith-based literature.
Mm.
So that's
Wow.
where this has come about, to highlight that not only do these books exist, because in the public libraries, do a lot of talk about equity, but who are excluded from these inclusion
Mm.
efforts? Uh, the
Mm.
Muslims are definitely one of those groups. So that's kind of where this comes about, the whole Islamic Library Association. And so I try to bring awareness to uh, the positive contributions that Muslims actually contribute to the literacy landscape. Um, and the work that you do, you're not only an author, you're an amazing person, you do all kinds of work for communities and societies. And this is what library is supposed to represent. And are you not part of your community? It should
Mm.
be.
I see. Okay.
So that's kind of it's layers, and it goes further and further and further out. Yes, you may be a part of your community, but you're also part of society. You're a part of other societies. You can live in other countries. Your books are, how are your books in other countries and not in the exact area that you're in? Make that make
Mm.
sense. So,
Wow, yeah,
um,
that's very deep. I'm actually very, intrigued, even by the fact that we have the Islamic, Library Association and the work that you do. I didn't even know this was like, um, possible, to be honest. I didn't even know like such a thing could exist. I mean, obviously it wasn't something I, focused on, but I just, sometimes subconsciously, we have things and we don't realize they're there until they bring out a possibility. And I realized when you approached me, I was like, wow, that's even possible. Like, I just kind of like, oh yeah, the American Library Association, that doesn't include us. And I just went on about my life. But to see that there's actually a space that's possible to create this is amazing. So may Allah bless the work that you're doing.
thank you. Well, I couldn't do it if it wasn't for people who do work like you. I'm not an author, but I believe, as a librarian, as a Muslim, and as an avid reader, your work and all the Muslims' contributions to literacy should be included in the very places that's talking about inclusion and literature. So, and it's not just the literature, it's the programs, the services, the activities. All this goes around the books that are within the library.
Mm.
So we got to get you in there so you can come in there and do your author talks inside the library, so you can offer services and, have programs around your books. Your books are extremely educational, uplifting, and it's not just about being holier art than thou. Islamic literature, is not solely about, conversion material, but our
Oh
lifestyle
yeah,
and
I
our
mean for sure.
experiences,
Yeah.
should be seen not only for us, but for other people. We have our own stories. We can tell them. We don't need anyone else to tell them. So
Yeah,
that's kind of good.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Yeah, and even my later books, specifically his other wife, especially, and then a lot of the, pretty much almost all the self help, it has no real conversion angle. It's really just a human story,
Hmm.
um, just on the page, and it just happens to be that the vast majority of these people are Muslim because that's my own background and my experience, and I can get really complex and nuanced with a Muslim scenario that as opposed to a non-Muslim scenario, which they're in there too.
Yeah.
But my immediate family, or at least most of my immediate family, because my parents accepted Islam the year that I was born, so I do have a few siblings that are not Muslim.
Hmm.
But, you know, my own experience growing up has
Hmm.
been Islam, so I can delve more deeply into that than other experiences. But yeah, so I'm happy to hear that this is a possibility, and I will be excited, to witness this happening. And I feel honored to be here watching history unfold because I'm like, sure, your name will be in history books about, yes, this is how this all got started. I mean, so many blessings.
Oh, inshallah. I just, inshallah, Allah does as He wills with who He wills, and we have to, as you know, be comfortable with what He's given us and to do our best with what He's given us. So,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely, absolutely.
So, what challenges have you faced? I know you've talked about some more feedback than pushback, but have there any been specific challenges that you've faced as a Muslim author or speaker?
Well, I would say the biggest challenges I faced beyond what I mentioned are my own internal challenges.
Hmm.
I've struggled through imposter syndrome. I've sometimes just struggled through, should I even be writing? Just, or am I even helping anybody? Even though I know that's not like logical, but when you're spiraling, it can, those questions sound very logical.
Hmm.
And I think like one of the biggest challenges I faced recently, and I'm still working through, is that how do we address the multiple levels of challenges faced by the Muslim woman in the United States of America, even within her own faith community.
Hmm.
And I don't quite know that because I'm still unpacking that, because as I come out of my own spiritual crisis, then when you interact with the wider community, you start seeing, whoa, this is a lot deeper than just I went through my own little private thing. It's a lot of things going on. And I think for me, finding a way to address this, because there are two things going on. That's internal struggle, but what I have found consistently, even when I'm in sessions with Muslim women who, especially those who are relatively new and just kind of, trying to figure out, new to my work, in the emotional health space, is that I consistently face this accusation of being, spreading, like, in a derogatory sense, feminism, and like this is against Islam to advocate for women in this way.
Hmm.
I don't really know how. I'm doing it. I'm showing up. I'm doing whatever I can, but it's actually one of the challenges that I really said, this one might take me out, because I can't, like, it's like no matter which way I go now, this is something I would say that is pretty normal. That's different. Like, for if I look at all of my works, just under a broad umbrella, yes, I get way more support and good feedback than I do pushback. But when it comes to advocating for women, it does a lot of pushback. And for me, I don't quite know how to really deal with that. Um, and I think, like, for some people, they really like this is something they believe is against Islam, And I don't really know, like, and because it's one of those things. It's kind of like it's just like it's a vicious cycle, like the catch-22. The more I try to explain how it's for Islam, the more I get accused of the very thing I'm trying to, debunk.
Yeah.
Because it's like, look at her, she's going, here she goes
Mm,
again. And I'm like, my God. So this is new to me, and the fact that I didn't know that it was this complex and pervasive, the anti-woman ideology amongst many Muslims. I didn't know that. Like, had I not been in this space advocating, I wouldn't have seen it,
mm,
because you don't usually see it unless you're in that space,
mhm.
And it's kind of like when I was living the life where everyone said I should be living, you know. And I wasn't doing. I was just, even when I wrote novels, I still got pushback. People saying writing novels and fiction's haram because you're lying or whatever. It was all kinds of,
Yeah.
interesting fatwas or whatever, but nothing on this level,
Mm,
And I almost feel like I was living a life similar to like a privileged person who didn't interact with the underprivileged until they, for whatever reason, they may be married into that family. Then all of a sudden they were introduced to this world. They're like, what in the world? I thought people were not necessarily exaggerating, but I just didn't know it was this bad. And that's how I feel, as a woman living in um, blessed solitude as assigned by Allah, not
I
by my
mean,
own plan.
I
Not
mean,
by my own plan, because I look, when I was growing up, my whole thing, I'm gonna be married, have children, whatever. But Allah tested me, had a whole separate plan. So I take it as, we should be grateful for Allah's qadr and be pleased with it. So I look at my journey today as blessed solitude as assigned
mm,
by Allah.
mm,
And I came protesting, before
mm,
I was like, why does this have to happen to me? So it's very interesting that that's not the narrative
mm,
that is put on me, and by men or women,
yeah.
and except I would say for the sisters who have taken the time to join my programs, to learn about my journey, they're like, whoa, they begin to realize. But that was something that, I mean, I knew there's a stigma with divorce, but I really didn't know the name calling, the slander, the
Mm,
sultan, the worst assumption,
yeah.
just I'm still, as I'm sitting here with you,
Mm-hmm.
I have not been able to fully process that because it doesn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what did I do except talk to my Rabb, to my
Mm,
creator, and ask for his guidance, and
mm,
he landed me here, and you have a problem with what he decided?
mm, mm. Yeah, but divorce is not haram.
Well, when it comes to a Muslim woman choosing it, trust and believe, many communities try as far as they can to teach that, or at least make you feel that your choice of it was,
Mm,
even if divorce itself isn't. And that's one of the things that was shocking to me. But if a man chooses it, it's sort of like, well, what
oh,
did she do?
yeah,
What did she do?
yeah. So either way, it's another catch-22. Divorce is
Absolutely.
acceptable and permissible, but only if the man says it. But then it's your fault. But then if you request it, then something's wrong with you. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah, you're just out here just trying to be like these feminists, and
mhm,
I those some of these people who say those types of things, these are the people who will be on my list on the day of judgment to meet them, because
mm,
because I Allah knows what is in the ghaib, in the unseen,
mm,
and depending on what I've been accused of, and it's a very short list, I can count on
yeah,
one hand, but there are people who I am like, Allah, like, I will not respond to this,
mm,
but I have a meeting with you. I just cried to him because
mm,
to know, like, I know what I went through, and
yeah,
I know how hard it was to make the decisions that I made,
mm,
and I know I didn't want to make those decisions, and nobody was handing out candy and stickers when I made that decision. Okay, so not even my own family, because even some of my family, they don't know because I didn't tell them, the details, and
every
it's not,
detail. Mm,
yeah, it's not their business, but that was strange even to my family, because my parents were married like about 54 years by the time my father passed, and then my other sisters some 20, 30 years, all this, my brothers, so it was a very strange thing, and it's very rare for that. So, but alhamdulillah, it wasn't anymore my family making those accusations, but the I was using it to say that even, it's still a bit strange, my
Mhm.
choices. Um, and I think, for me, that's, if I were to say, that's the biggest challenge, to have to get up and show up every day
Mm,
as a believing woman and be a target
mm.
of other people's slander and personal attacks, mistreatment, because I had the faith in my creator to do what he showed me I had to do, even when I didn't want to.
Yes. Well, subhanAllah, at least you did what you had to do, And like you said, it's not easy, or you didn't necessarily want to, but you did what you had to do. You did what
Yeah.
Allah, had for you, you know. Um, but if we can go real back to something that you said about the feminism, what about, the Holy Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam when he talked about, the kind of treatment towards women, that he really talked about that in his last sermon. So does that not
I mentioned
cross
that,
over
but
for
these
some
are,
people?
well, it doesn't affect people, because what I have found is that the rhetoric is basically, these are the phrases and slogans and situations that feminists use to justify their craziness, basically. So if you mention Khadija radiallahu anha, let's say for example for running a business, even that had nothing to do with divorce,
Mhm.
then oh, that's what they look at these feminists. That's what they like to do. If you mention how many of the Sahaba got divorced, oh, look at them. That's what they like to do. Right? Women are supposed to be treated right. Oh yeah, but the men and women should be making sajda to their husbands. If it wasn't forbidden. Things like this. So there is no argument you can use to reach these people. In most cases, there are very rare exceptions, but it's all very, very, like, it's more proof against you. The fact that you're going to mention things from the Prophet ﷺ is like, that's proof that you're misguided, because those
Um,
are the slogans and the things that the people who are like this use. And what I realized, and I'm actually working on a book about this, and I did a course on this, is how there is. It took me a while to realize, but there is a part of Islam where there's this male supremacist ideology as opposed to qawama, because Islam is qawama, where there's this divinely assigned male leadership and protection of the well-being and safety of women. That's
mhm,
Islamic paradigm. But then there's a male supremacist paradigm that has been conflated with the Islamic paradigm.
mhm,
And whenever you're looking at the male supremacist ideology that is taught, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, in Muslim spaces, I had this epiphany, and that's when I realized why it wasn't working. Because in the male supremacist ideology that is painted as Islam,
mhm,
which the red pill community uses it, and a lot of the Muslim community, people who go along with that type of manosphere stuff, they use it. But basically, what it is that they are anti-feminism more than they're pro-Islam. So basically, so what that means is that these are people who fear feminism more than they fear Allah,
mhm,
and they hate feminism more than they love Islam. So
mhm,
what that ends up being is that they are willing to reject and fight and oppose parts of Islam that even look even slightly close to feminism, rather than to risk accepting all of Islam and having any part of anything that can look like feminism in their practice of their faith.
mhm. That's deep.
And
That's
sad.
very serious. That's very serious. So, with all of that, how do you prioritize your self care?
For me, one of the commitments that I made coming out of all of this, the
Mhm.
most important one I started off with was my spiritual commitment. So I have a commitment of reading the Quran every day, even no matter how tired I am, even if it's one ayah, if it's just 1 second, or a
Mhm.
few seconds. I don't think I get much done in 1 second, but you know what I'm saying. There's
Yeah.
Alif Lam, I get something done. And then read something from the Quran every day, no matter what. Obviously, praying my five prayers, and then also getting up in the last third of the night before Fajr, even if it's just a very short time, but just putting my alarm a bit before Fajr and making that prayer as much as I can. And then also, I implement something I talk about in Feminine Soul Reset, where it's based on the ayah from Surah Al-Shams, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا, where verily the one who is the like whoever has like purified it has succeeded, meaning the nafs. And the nafs in Arabic is actually, they translate it as soul, but it's actually the body, the mind, and the soul, which includes the spiritual heart. So it includes the nervous system, it includes all of this. So every day I have to take care of my body, I have to take care of my mind, and I have to take care of my soul. And with my body, I focus on, like, and I teach this in Feminine Soul Reset, which is something called anah. This is from the Prophet ﷺ, where he says al anah min Allah wal ajala min shaitan, which is this calm, in this inner calm, which biology, mental health, or neuroscience field, they would call it nervous system regulation.
Mhm.
That's what they would call it. He's saying that's from Allah. And ajala, this inner unrest, this which they would call nervous system dysregulation, but they translate it as haste and unrest. That's from shaitan. So I do have exercises to calm my nervous system, to be in that space of anah. The Prophet ﷺ said, and for my mind, I have affirmations that I say, like in one of my main affirmations that I say for myself and that I teach to the sisters to say to themselves, I say to my nafs, you are safe, you are loved, Allah is with you. And I keep saying that. And then for my soul, I just mentioned, what I use for my soul.
Wow, alhamdulillah, that is so nice. I just think that that's so beneficial across the board. And I wish that people who, even if you haven't gone through anything as traumatic as a divorce, there's still challenges in life, you know. So,
Absolutely.
ladies in particular, should try to calm, their mind, body, and soul, and I think what you're doing,
Absolutely.
that's amazing, amazing to offer that space. It's that's great, alhamdulillah. So with all that you're doing, with all that you've done, all that you've been through, just after all of that up until this point now, what advice would you give to aspiring authors or people who want to have a positive impact in their lives, their families, or communities?
I would say prioritize your soul and understand your why
Mhm.
before taking action. And just, and then after that, you talk to Allah and speak from your heart and just go and do whatever brings you joy.
Ah, that's good. That's good. Can you tell us about any current projects, books, or courses, anything you have developing going on? We know you got something
Well,
on.
I mean, yeah, so I have the main book that I have coming up now is called But Do You Feel Safe with Him? 10 Reasons Why Performing Femininity Never Works in Love. And so that will be out in August. It's available for pre-order, and I have been doing some interviews and events, and I have one that is the day after tomorrow with Alim Institute with Ustad Ubaidullah Evans. He interviewed me about the book. We have some series of videos, and this was also connected to his wife, was one of my students, or is one of my students in Feminine Soul Reset, that I mentioned earlier. And so basically, I would say the Feminine Soul Reset program is the main focus right now. And then also, and in addition to that, the book, But Do You Feel Safe with Him? That's coming out in August. However, the Sisters in Feminine Soul Reset will get to read over half of it before it comes out, and they will have a private book club that they can that they're all able to participate in June, July, and August. And then at the end of August, they get the book will be able to be whoever wants to order it. So though that's what I'm doing now.
Nice. So, how do you see your work evolving over the next few years? Do you have a specific goal for your audience or a specific impact? What do you see for the future for you?
Right now, to be honest, I'm reaching this point where, and I just talked to the students in my Quran class, my tadabbur that I teach, and in my feminine soul reset. I'm actually doing my own reset of my own life. So I'm going to be taking some time to myself, my soul, with me and my creator for the next 3 months, just to actually answer that question. And one of the questions I am asking myself and Allah during this time is that, do I want to be in the public space anymore?
Mhm.
Only because of how very challenging it is, and because I one of the tests that happened to me during my spiritual crisis after I left the my first marriage was the health challenges due to the excessive cortisol level in my system, where the doctor told me that if I continued in this way, I would literally drop dead, you know, and so because it's so triggering and
Mhm.
my nervous system gets easily dysregulated because of the health challenges and the things that I pushed myself through and trying to perform femininity and show up in the way that everybody said the good wife and mother's supposed to. We're like superwoman, and so yeah, yeah. So it made my body
Mhm.
break down with, in addition to other challenges that life just brings anyway. So I'm going to sit with myself, and who knows, 3 months from now, maybe you won't hear from me anymore. I don't know what's going to happen,
I
but
understand.
I don't know what, except that I know that in my own private, personal space, I do want to finish my journey of memorizing the Quran, because I kept starting over and over. And I started over after my divorce, and I was like, okay, this time I'm not going to start over again. My teachers were like, you don't have to keep doing that. I was like, no, but I need to see the world in a new way, through the Quran. But I am working on some more novels, and we'll see where that goes, inshallah. Um, but I don't, it's, if I'm being 100% honest, it's not my priority. My priority is just to listen to my inner self in a space of calm while talking to Allah and, doing my Quran, and see where that takes me. So maybe we can follow up in what, September or October, and let's see what happens. I don't know. But yeah, but I don't know actually what's in the future, because, or I mean, obviously we never know, but I don't know, have a
Yeah.
plan, a projection,
Mhm.
because I think I'll be 50 this year in December.
Oh,
Yeah,
happy
so
early birthday.
thank you. So I don't know. I actually, a part of me just feels like I'm saying goodbye to the public space. A part of me. I don't know what that means.
I understand. I understand what you're saying, and I respect it. And I think it's very respectable to acknowledge how you're feeling and what's best for you. And that's part of it. That's part of. I'm sure your self help, self talk, all of that, and it's gonna look different for each person. But I
Yeah.
definitely understand. You know.
Well, if, and I do believe, if I do come back, Allah has a plan that's better than the plan that I would have made for myself.
Yes. Either way. And again, we have to trust and believe that, and then go with the process. Now, trust the process and go with the flow with what Allah sets before you. So, again, you corrected me. You have over 50 books now. Where can people find your work?
I would say that for my books, they can find, my books are in many, many places. You can find it Barnes and Noble. I don't know people's preferences, but I have a page, a dedicated page on Amazon, and you can find that at uzauthor.com. My initials UZ, and then the word author.com, and that's there. Anyone who's interested in Feminine Soul Reset, that I talked about, they can just go to sqsoul.com. And anyone who is interested in anything that I do with Quran, that's uzhearthub.com.
Thank you so much. We'll post that when this video comes out. We'll post, where they can find it. And is there anything else that you have that you'd like to add?
No, I would just say thank you for this opportunity, and it's very inspirational. And I really pray that Allah blesses this initiative for the books, the Islamic books, or at least the Muslim authored books, to be in the library space. I really, really commend that. So thank you.
Mhm. Thank you. And inshallah, whether you choose to stay in a public place or not, or get your books in the public libraries
Yeah,
in
thank you.
America, right where you are.
Thank you. Inshallah. I look forward to it.
Inshallah. Well, thank you so much, Zakiyyah, for sharing your insights and experiences with us. Your work is truly inspiring, and we're grateful for the opportunity to learn from you. Um, Once again, we thank you for your time and your wisdom and your huge contribution to the literary landscape that strives to meet the needs of Muslim women. And thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, thank you. Okay.
You're welcome.
Salaam alaikum.
All right, so. Join the Islamic Library Association, and together we can shape a more inclusive future for literature.